Hello, we're in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, standing in front of a landmark building that needs a lot of work. The property is on the market for $22 million and the interior has been completely gutted. I'm Anna Karp. I'm a general contractor in New York City, and I am also CEO of a design and build company called Bolster. So before this property was gutted, a couple basically treated it as their labor of love and spent 18 years restoring the property to its original condition. It had 8 bedrooms, 9.5 bathrooms, and a lot of space for entertaining. There is a stark contrast between the exterior and the limestone facade that is very well preserved because it's landmarks, and the interior that we're gonna see inside. It's a French Renaissance exterior and mansion. Industrialists in the US at the time were looking towards European castles and influences to build their prime neighborhoods. This limestone facade is very interesting because it has a lot of ornate and intricate details. As you can see, it's got turrets on either side near the roof, a curb on the top. We have a lot of fleur-de-lis details, which are obviously an ode to France. Carving such detail on limestone is expensive, and obviously this was meant to be high-end for the original mansion. It's very, very well preserved considering how old it is. Oftentimes facades also need a good wash. They're like us, we wash our face in the morning. Facades need a wash now and then too, and that can do wonders for the look and feel of the property. In this facade specifically, we also have the wraparound terrace that provides like a completely different look from the mansions of the era. So the architect, Gilbert, really spent some time trying to elude the grandeur of the French style at the time. Not only is it expensive to restore a facade of this type, it's very hard to find the companies that are able to do it in New York City right now. A normal brownstone restoration would cost around $100,000. This restoration would cost at least 3 times as much as a normal brownstone restoration. In New York City, when you have buildings in disrepair, oftentimes you have to scaffold the property to make sure that everybody that is walking up and down the sidewalk is protected. The current owner did a lot of structural work. We have to have this scaffolding. You see a depth in the different layers of limestone work that are very, very intricate. And you also can see the frame of the original door. Let's go inside and take a look at the other original details that remain. As you can see, the property has been completely gutted. The reason why the entrance is to the side is so that you can have a larger space in order to entertain, or so you can have a big reception. So there's a lot of steel beams that you're going to see that are holding up the original structure. Things that we would not consider to be structural are structural in a very old property like this one. So for example, if we look at the photos, the marble staircase that was not only ornate and beautiful might have played a role in being a spinal cord, in keeping up the property in its shape. Originally, this parlor floor would have been a ground floor. Anybody that restores or renovates it will again give it that use. So now we have gone underneath the basement level, and this is the area where the current owner spent a lot of his investment, and this is also the reason why we see steel across all the other floors throughout the property. Manhattan is a tiny little island, and there's a lot of coveted real estate. When there is no option to go up, developers or people that are looking to expand their footprint decide to go down. In this instance, the aim was to have a swimming pool and a basketball court indoors, which would definitely provide the new owner the flexibility they need to do the sports. However, it came at a hefty price tag. We're on the second floor of the property. You will notice at the back here, we start to see the grand staircase. We can also notice what we're missing, that grand marble staircase that brought us into this floor. So there's a beautiful banister there with a lot of intricate detail, definitely handmade. The craftsmanship mirrors the facade and mirrors the opulence that the property used to have. Another interesting feature that we can see here is the plaster work, which would have been underneath the entire staircase. Some of that is going into the third floor already. Whenever we encounter staircases, we're in a little bit of a dilemma. Sometimes staircases are lopsided and cannot be kept. At that point, we decide, do we restore, do we replicate, do we ditch? The restoration of a staircase like this would be very intricate. However, this staircase is mahogany. It's a very hard wood, very common at the time. You could probably have kept it for another 100 years. Oftentimes with these properties, the main issue that we have is how to light such a space. The intention of the architect is to have like that grand bay window, also to have drawn light from the back wall. We see here a lot of the brickwork that was original. You can see by the color of the bricks, they're very, very old. The material that was used to join the bricks turns into ash. My bet is that a lot of that happened in the property here because there's a lot of new brickwork across the different floors. So if I had all the money and all the time in the world, I would get the best restorers. I would totally geek out and find those companies in Brooklyn or even in Europe that would be able to help me bring this property back to its original condition. Basically, look at the original layout and make space for rooms and create the ornate detail that this house merits and it's absolutely craving and shouting for. It needs love, it needs attention. I would subdivide this room, which I believe originally had a beautiful bronze door. I would create a beautiful family room here, a space to hang out and look onto the river, a space to be together. We've seen the public area of the house where people used to entertain, where they used to hang out with their families, but we're now going to take a closer look at the upstairs, the more private area for the family. Let's take a walk upstairs. In this room, we have the construction office. Every building site has an office. Therefore, you're going to see a lot of the plans and a lot of the things that the builders need to build. No shame in that. Original wood flooring, very typical of New York City, with a very straight bicolor border and a herringbone inlay. Quite possibly cherry wood. Other lower end properties used pine. It was still a different quality of pine than what we find right now, and definitely very beautiful. But cherry was sort of the higher end material that used to be used for flooring. Interestingly, we also have the detailing around the fireplace, which gives us an idea of the scale and the grandeur of the mantelpieces that this house had. Function and form. The fireplaces were used to heat up the property, so you can see that you have that black, veiny, beautiful, more than 100-year-old marble that also helped with the fire stopping, right? And to be able to keep the fire going because these were working fires. If you look at this element here in the fire mantle, it actually makes you think of a coat of arms, right? It speaks to that French Renaissance era where Americans were looking to bring all that culture from Europe. This wall is temporary. You would at least want to mirror the proportion on either side of the fireplace. So you would be looking at having a much larger room here, definitely more grandeur. Another interesting thing that we find in this construction office is detailing or remnants of the coffered ceiling, which can definitely, again, be replicated. Recreating a coffered ceiling is an art form. The pieces have to be cast and then they have to be molded, as it were, to the original ceiling. Alternatively, this piece is a rosetta, and so if you see the hole, you would imagine it in the middle of a room and you would have a light fixture hanging from it, perhaps to the unexpert eye, as if it was original. A very exciting highlight of today is being able to find this cross-section where we can actually see how people used to build at the time. We're able to see the original brick, a thinner stud than what we use right now. A type of material that was used as concrete is basically interlaced with these little pieces of timber, the layers that basically keep the plaster in place. And a very interesting element of the time is that plaster used to be mixed with horsehair, which basically helps the elements like keep together. This technique is used currently in adobe, for example, where you have clay and you keep it together with like some sort of like hay. This is all building up to the beautiful trim that was probably manufactured in a mill shop, but that is definitely handmade. Some of these pieces are different. It's a subtle difference, but still it's like super intricate work. In this bay window, we can see what the actual windows would have looked like. And a very important element that we see here are the grills. These grills would have been custom made and something that could be replicated. We would also have to have them made custom as well. You can see the ornate details again that speak to the architectural language of the bay window. Architectural grills cannot be overlooked when you're trying to get a cohesive look. And definitely if you're thorough about doing a high-end renovation, it's the details that matter. So you always want to have an architectural grille that speaks to the era and that also blends into the design of the millwork. Light is a beautiful material. It is not an element. It's actually an architectural material, as intangible as it might be. And this is a beautiful example of what light can do to a property, because we can see like the ornate detail in the balustrade change from like super baroque and super heavy and like beautifully constructed into some delicate Doric columns. As we move from the public to the private, we're simplifying the use of the space. So the ornament is not there to impress. Even in a mansion in the Upper West Side of New York City, people were conscious about their budget. So probably the family and the architect wanted to spend less money in the private area, and therefore you see a stark contrast between the ornamentation of the balustrade in the public area and the private area. And now we're going into the private. Another beautiful thing that we can see in terms of construction at the time is the ceilings. A lot of the beams basically have an interconnection with what is called a crisscross. And the crisscross was basically a structural support that allowed the preservation of the beams. Otherwise, they would get bent or would subside. It was actually quite a smart solution. We definitely don't use it anymore, but it's beautiful to see how this crisscross was integrated into the structure of the property. The fourth floor has a different layout because right here on this floor, we have the balcony that the architect created. So let's take a look. The architect had the brilliant idea of building a balcony, which is very unusual for these kinds of properties. Because of this balcony, we're now able to zoom into the details of the limestone facade, and we can talk a little bit more about what it would be like to restore. We would like to clean up the areas that don't need so much work, but we would definitely need to replicate some of the pieces that are destroyed. Everything suffers from wear and tear, particularly in exteriors. And even though this facade is in excellent condition, it would still require quite a lot of work. If we were to replicate a piece, we would very carefully have to separate it from the facade, take it to a shop, and then recreate it and reinstall it. Hence the point of a restoration of a facade of this type being way more expensive than a traditional brownstone restoration. And it's very obvious if we look at this facade up close why landmarks would definitely want this property preserved. If we look at the entry downstairs, we will see that the detailing of the facade also changes. We have gargoyles at the bottom, and we have little cherubs and angels at the top. So I think it's also very interesting and playful how the architect decided to use different elements in different floors of the house. It seems to be a running theme. So we made it to the top of the staircase. We're now on the 5th floor. We can see that the staircase is definitely at its simplest up here. We're basically in an attic where we can see original construction as well. These like very angular rafters that basically help us shape the very pitch roof. The space is an open plan attic, and it really makes you feel like you're in Paris. I would definitely leave it open. I would definitely create a studio and a space open for creativity in order to enjoy the wonderful light that we have here. We have a beautiful, massive skylight, which is massive now and would have been even harder to create at the time. Originally, the property had an oval skylight, which is very beautiful and very of the era. The oval shape speaks to the view that you get as you look down the staircase, where we get that very grandiose, sort of like circular perspective. And we can see the beautiful, like interesting mechanisms that we see sometimes in properties of the era to open and close the windows. So I think this space is definitely one of the most beautiful spaces in the house, definitely the most private, and definitely the one that I would use as a creative space. When you buy a property and where you're looking to buy a property that is in a state condition or in a state of disrepair, you have a big challenge ahead of you. The main reason why you have a challenge is because it's very hard to X-ray a property. Nobody can do it, so you don't know where you're gonna find all the surprises. However, things to look out for are things level. Do I smell mold? Do I see leaks everywhere? Has anybody put any money into this property in the last 30 years? These are very simple, like red flags that will help someone understand the level of investment into the mechanical, electrical, and structural elements. When we think of a mansion of this type, we can think of resilience. This property is on sale for $22 million. The renovation or the restoration could range anything north of $15 million. Therefore, the property would be completely priced out of the Upper West Side area. Remember, here we're standing in Riverside Drive. We are not in Park Avenue. We're not on Fifth Avenue. We did speak to a few brokers, and the most expensive townhome here in the Upper West Side is on or around $26 million. It's a shame that this property has been gutted. It's a shame that we find it now in a state of near abandonment or disrepair. But I am confident that definitely there is an institution or a person that will have the commitment to bring it back to its former glory. This visit has been a little bit of a scouting mission where we have been able to piece together what the property used to look like by being careful and taking a closer look at all the remnants. And I believe that whomever takes on the challenge can do the historical and archival research in order to also tie together the story that they want to tell.